The snow was already falling when they left her there. Not a word, not a note, just the sound of a car engine fading down an empty street, and a 63-year-old woman standing on the sidewalk in front of a shelter she had never seen before, holding a single plastic bag with everything she owned inside it. It was Christmas Eve, and the people who drove away were her children. Nobody at the shelter knew who she was that night. Nobody knew her name had once been on a company letterhead. Nobody knew she had spent 30 years building something quietly extraordinary. She was just a woman in a thin coat, blinking against the cold, trying to understand how her life had arrived at this exact moment. And the man who would eventually learn her story, a man who had spent 2 decades accumulating more money than most people see in 10 lifetimes, would later say that what she told him changed the way he understood everything. Not just wealth, not just family, everything. If that already has you leaning in, stay with me, because this story goes somewhere most people are not prepared for. And if this is the kind of storytelling that stops you mid-scroll and makes you feel something real, hit subscribe right now. There are more stories like this one waiting for you, and each one cuts a little deeper than the last. Her name was Margaret. And before we go any further, you need to understand what she was before that night, because the distance between who she had been and where she stood on that sidewalk is the whole point of everything that follows. Margaret had grown up in a working-class household in western Pennsylvania, the youngest of 4 kids, in a house where money was not just tight. It was a source of constant, low-grade fear that hummed underneath every conversation like a bad electrical wire. Her father worked 2 jobs and still came home with not enough. Her mother stretched every dollar until it was nearly transparent. And Margaret watched all of it, absorbed all of it, and somewhere in her teenage years made a quiet, fierce decision that she was going to understand money in a way her family never had. She did not go to a prestigious university. She went to a state school, worked 30 hours a week while carrying a full course load, graduated with a degree in accounting and a ferocious clarity of purpose. By her late 20s, she had her own small bookkeeping firm. By her mid-30s, that firm had grown into a financial consulting operation serving mid-sized businesses across 3 states. By her mid-40s, she had quietly accumulated a net worth that would have stunned most of the people who passed her on the street, because Margaret did not look wealthy. She drove a 10-year-old sedan, she wore sensible shoes, she lived in the same modest house she had bought in her 30s and never felt the need to upgrade. Her wealth was not a costume, it was a foundation, and she never confused the two. She had 2 children, a son and a daughter, both of whom she had raised largely alone after her marriage ended in her early 40s. She had given them everything. Good schools, opportunities, stability, the exact opposite of the financial anxiety she had grown up inside. And for a long time, from the outside at least, it looked like it had worked. They were grown, they had careers, they had lives. She was proud of them. She told people she was proud of them. But there was a part of the story she kept private, even from herself, for longer than she should have. The dependency had crept in so slowly she almost did not see it coming. First it was a loan here, a bailout there, her son's failed business venture, her daughter's divorce, the kind of financial emergencies that families absorb all the time and think nothing of. But then the request kept coming. And when Margaret, at 61, sat both of her children down and told them gently but clearly that she was restructuring her estate, that she was giving a significant portion of her wealth to charitable foundations she had been building for years, and that she expected them to become financially self-sufficient, the warmth in the room drained away so fast it was almost audible. The calls became less frequent, the visits stopped, and then, 2 years after that conversation, on the 24th of December, her son and daughter arrived at her house together, a visit she had been hopeful about, had prepared for, had cooked for. They stayed for less than an hour. They told her she was being selfish. They told her she had failed them. And then they drove her to a shelter, told her she could figure out her own life the way she was making them figure out theirs, and left. She spent that Christmas Eve in a room with 11 other women, on a cot with a wool blanket, listening to a small television play holiday music in the corner. She was not broke. She was not helpless. She had accounts. She had assets. She had a phone with people she could have called. But something in her had gone so quiet that she just sat there. Not crying, not planning. Just sitting with the full weight of what had just happened, trying to feel the edges of it. This is the part of the story where the quiet millionaire enters. His name was Daniel, and he had made his money in commercial real estate over a span of about 22 years, the kind of steady, unglamorous wealth building that never makes headlines but compounds into something enormous over time. He volunteered at that shelter every Christmas Eve, not because it made him look good, not because anyone knew he did it, but because his own mother had spent a winter in a shelter when he was 9 years old, and he had never forgotten what it felt like to be on the other side of that door. He showed up every year with food and supplies and a willingness to just sit and listen to whoever needed to talk. No agenda, no performance, just presence. He sat down next to Margaret that night because she was the only person in the room who looked completely still. Not peaceful, still. The way a person looks when they are somewhere so far inside their own thoughts that the world has gone temporarily mute around them. He handed her a cup of coffee and did not say anything for a while. And eventually, over the next 2 hours, she told him everything. Daniel had heard hard stories before. He had heard stories of addiction and abuse and loss and poverty that would hollow out most people just to listen to. But something about Margaret's story reached him differently, and it took him a few days after that night to understand why. It was not the abandonment, as brutal as that was, that broke his heart. It was the realization she shared quietly near the end of their conversation, the one that hit him like something cold and clarifying. She said she had spent her entire adult life teaching her children about financial security and had forgotten to teach them about financial dignity. There is a difference, she said, between giving someone stability and teaching someone to stand. And she had confused the two for 30 years. That sentence stayed with Daniel for a long time. He wrote it down when he got home that night. He shared it eventually, and this is the moment that the audience at Shadowlight Stories has heard referenced in other stories but never fully traced back to its origin. With a group of young entrepreneurs he mentored, because he felt it contained something about wealth and inheritance and love that he had never heard articulated quite so cleanly before. The room went quiet when he said it, because everyone in that room at some level recognized the confusion she had named, the difference between giving someone a soft landing and teaching them how to fall and get back up. Margaret, for her part, did not collapse. She called a friend the next morning, stayed there while she sorted through what had happened, and over the following months made decisions about her life with a clarity she had not felt in years. She did not forgive her children immediately. She did not pursue reconciliation out of guilt. She let things settle at whatever temperature they were going to settle at, and she rebuilt her daily life around the things that had always fed her. Her work, her giving, the quiet satisfaction of problems solved and people helped. She was not a victim in this story. She had never been a victim in any story, but she had been wrong about something important, and she was willing to sit with that without flinching. The deeper truth underneath all of this, the thing that makes this more than just a painful family story, is what it reveals about the way love and money get tangled up inside families in ways that almost nobody talks about honestly. There is a version of financial generosity that is genuinely generous, and there is a version that is really about something else, about control, about being needed, about the unbearable discomfort of watching someone you love struggle when you have the power to remove the struggle entirely. Those two versions can look identical from the outside for years, decades even, and the difference only becomes visible when the money changes or threatens to change, and you see what was actually underneath it all along. Daniel thought about his own children after that night. He thought about what he was building for them versus what he was building in them. He thought about the difference, and it is not a small difference, between an inheritance that arrives and an inheritance that is earned. Not earned in the transactional sense, not as a condition or a reward, but earned in the deeper sense of being genuinely prepared to receive it, to hold it without being diminished by it, to carry it forward without losing yourself in the carrying. He started having different conversations with his kids after that Christmas Eve. Harder conversations, more honest ones, the kind that do not feel like love in the moment, but are the most loving thing a parent can actually do. Margaret and Daniel stayed in occasional contact after that night. Not a dramatic friendship, not a storybook connection, just two people who had looked at something true together and never quite forgot it. She sent him a short message about a year later. It said simply that she was well, that she had made peace with the shape of her life, and that she hoped he was doing the same. He kept that message. He still has it. Here is what I want to ask you, and I mean this genuinely, not as a rhetorical device but as a real question worth sitting with. Has there been someone in your life, maybe someone you love deeply, that you have been helping in a way that might actually be holding them back? Drop your honest answer in the comments, because I think more people are living inside this story than would ever say it out loud. And if this moved you, if it reached something real, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Not because it is a good video, but because the person you are thinking of right now probably needs this story more than you do. What you give someone is not always what you give them. Sometimes the most generous thing and the most damaging thing wear exactly the same face.